Hello.
Hey. That was a good start.
Yeah, it was. It was. This is another episode of Biweeklycast, number 14. The hosts are still there. This is me, Dima Malyanko.
And I'm Slava Rudnitsky. And, before I tell you the topic of our today's conversation, I think that I'm getting superstitious a bit. Because, that there are people who believe in black cats, the 13th floor and stuff. And I think that I have such a event in my life. If the follow-up part of notes in our podcast is empty, it means Dima Malenko had a really busy week.
It may mean that. And, right before we clicked the record button, I was thinking that, hey, there was a piece I wanted to bring in, not as a follow-up, but maybe as a follow-up to an earlier episode. And I was trying to remember what was this. I'm not quite sure, but I can, if you insist on a follow-up, I can bring this thing up.
Please do.
Remember when we read, which book that was, where there was an idea that a hero of the book can be something in some inanimate object or something like that, like a place, or was it Tell to Win or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then we had a little bit of debate where I was saying that, hey, maybe that's possible, and you were saying no, that's just a decoration. The hero must be like a human or like an animate being, actually. And I'm now we have good people at my work. They started a book club, which I joined, and the first book we are reading is the book Taste by Stanley Tucci. He's a relatively famous Hollywood actor, and the book is quite good. And I wanted to say that here, this is an example of book where food, kind of the recipes and the idea of food and cooking is the hero of the book. But then as I progressed through the book, no, it is a way to tell a story about the author. Stanley tells the story about his life through the food. So you proved to be right once again.
Or we just need to read more to find the stories that are there that we just haven't read yet.
Yes, this can also be true as well, which proves the point. You are right once again.
And I'm not that right about the topic of our today's conversation, because we are going to talk about the corporate culture. And the reason why I thought about bringing up this topic is that I kind of got more responsible for the culture in our team lately, maybe for the past 6 months. And it feels unmanageable to me. I can see that this thing is so complex and depends on so many factors and people and stuff, that whenever I hear people saying you should really manage and pay attention to the corporate culture in your team, it feels unrealistic to me. And people who say so probably use some tools. And today I wanted to try to analyze what things are suggested as the management tools for the corporate culture, and whether it's actually possible to meaningfully impact this thing. Or it just happens that some things affect the corporate culture and it changes, but one cannot really manage in the direct meaning of the word manage.
Oh, that's a deep, rich, and interesting topic. Let's get started.
Traditionally, we start with the definitions, and I found one that I pretty much like. It says that the corporate culture, or also known as organizational culture, refers to the values and behaviors that make up the office life, but we can substitute the word office into team life or company life. Climate, define the way employees and management interact, influence the company's outside business transactions. In most cases, corporate culture is something that develops over time and is implied rather than being defined. And that's one of the things that it was straight in the definition, that it kind of shapes by itself, and there is not a single or not even a team of actors, but it's just a feature of a group.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I would have two things to note about this definition. I have a little bit of harder time parsing the definition which use the word like here refers like corporate, when instead of saying like something is like corporate culture refers to values and behaviors. So is it more than values and behavior, like what it actually is? And this adds to vagueness of the definition, at least for me. And then the last sentence that you read, that corporate culture is something that develops over time and is implied rather than being defined. I would make this one maybe a bit stronger, saying that corporate culture is something that emerges over time. So it's like a product of bigger product of smaller things. At least this is the way how I look at this. But yeah, but that's a workable definition, I think.
It sounds fair, and for me it was quite confusing hearing from multiple people that this thing is manageable. Not going too far, my partner Anya Krasilnik believes that this is something that can be managed, can be defined, can be explained, can be promoted. And to a certain degree, I've seen that in our team. Like, she promoted some values and behaviors and traditions and stuff, and they became a norm. They were institutionalized in our performance review, feedback sessions, quality control processes and stuff, and they kind of became normal for most people around. So I did see some changes. The question is whether they can truly be intentional and whether you can predict what you do. Like in management, when you set a task, you kind of assume what the result is going to be. When you make a change related to corporate culture, I kind of can't do that, and maybe somebody knows how to do that. But I started looking into some materials, and the first one I got was a Harvard Business Review article. These guys went really far. They defined a number of corporate cultures and styles, their orientation, statistics, how many people believe this is their dominant sort of culture. It was generally interesting. It's they named it the Leader's Guide to Corporate Culture. I wouldn't say it's a guide, because I think that you would say, like, actually, this is not a handbook or not a manual, so how can it be a guide? But what I think is really nice about this thing is the chart with pros and cons of culture styles. I don't know. I can share a screen or just ask you to scroll there.
Yeah, probably I can scroll. That's a long article. I think I thought I was looking at this on my phone and I didn't quite realize how big it is. Is it towards? Yes, yeah, I got the graph.
Yep. And they suggest that there is a number of styles there, and by the size of this little dot, you could say that this is how many people believe this is the primary style in their team. And statistically, the biggest or the most popular ones are results and caring, like two most popular styles of culture. And then some others like order, safety, authority, enjoyment, learning, and purpose. I was kind of confused about purpose being so small, but anyway.
To be honest, granted, I think I didn't read the full article. Maybe I read half or the first third of it. I think what confuses me here, where they propose that there are cultural styles like purpose, caring, order, safety, and stuff like that. What not necessarily confuses me, what I think is maybe misguided here, is that we just discussed that the definition of corporate culture itself is very vague, right? So it's very amorphous thing, and like shaky and like jelly like. And then on top of this jelly like thing, we define this culture style thing, which is also in its definition probably is jelly like. So we put one jelly like thing on another jelly like thing and say it's 75. Yes, maybe, but it's so shaky that I find it hard to trust or to meaningfully interpret those numbers, and I'm not sure I subscribe to idea of cultural styles anyway.
All right.
But
My point here was that a lot of people care about results and when they shape their values. And one of the examples was this Netflix thing about we are the professional team of Formula One or something like that. The metaphor that we care about how well you deliver and how professional you are. And if you don't deliver, farewell. Because that's what we care about. We are not a family. We are a professional team.
Right.
And I've heard so many different variations of this, interpretation of company values, basically saying that people do tend to be switched between two: caring, like family style, we care about each other, we are a family, we work together, and then this professional or result-oriented thing, like just do your job, deliver the results, and you'll be fine in this environment or in this culture.
I guess, wouldn't you say that this is more or less natural outcome of things? Because I bet that HBR talks to businesses, right? And businesses exist to, well, cynically, but to turn profit, right? And they do that by hopefully delivering value to their customers. This is the method of turning profit, and this is the reason why businesses kind of exist, right? Even if we step away from the cynical part, if the founder of a business wants to do something good, he starts business to deliver results. So to me, from that point of view, it's only natural that when we start with the premise that corporate culture is helping businesses thrive, and given that the results are one of the goals of business's very existence, then the corporate cultures revolve around results. And I guess caring, I would say, it's probably the first product of working as a team, right? This is what you expect from not being alone. Then when you struggle and when there is something different, there would be someone you can lean on and someone who could offer you a hand in doing something, and in return you would do similar thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure though if they define caring the way I just define it.
For me, it was more like a difference between a product company that you used to work in, like Flap, where it seemed to me like more of a family style where you would know most of the people and you would interact friendly. And then the other business that you were working to that cannot be named online, but maybe it can. Are you still under NDA?
Yeah, I think I am.
Till the end of the days. But that was a different culture. A company that would work very differently by the motives, behaviors, a set of rules and things that they cared about. And then there is a very interesting question, philosophical question probably. If you have this small startup that suddenly gets very popular and attracts a lot of money, and you hire plus 400% of people there, is it theoretically possible to hire people that would match this initial culture that you had within a team of 20 or 30 when you scale up? Or it's just a necessary change that has to happen in the growth? When you start scaling, like, things change, period.
I think there are several questions there, and I'll try to answer them as I remember them. First, I think generally I sort of believe that corporate culture can be managed. It may not be easy, and we probably will spend the rest of the episode today discussing that. But I start with the premise that yes, that there are ways to manage corporate culture. And the second one would be scaling from a dozen of people to, like, say, 1,000 or something like that. I think it is not necessary that the culture of 12 people should be preserved when we move to that new scale. But at the same time, I think there is a real real possibility. It's not guaranteed, but it is possible to build the culture for that 1,000 in a shape, or less like not build, like shape the culture for that 1,000 in particular direction if someone pays attention to that. I think one of the things I learned from working in the startup was that when you just start with a product, typically, high tech startup, right, thing, it would be started around the product and vision for something to be created and provided to customers. And for founders, that would be their first kind of mission and job, just prove that whatever they're creating is useful, find that product market fit, and so on and so forth. But then after that, I believe that their job switches from building the product to building the team or the company. And this is where they would step in and start building. That's not entirely correct word, but building the machine or building the system or the structure that would build products, so that they remove themselves from the product, working directly on the product. But that is all based on the idea or my belief that yes, there are ways to try to shape corporate culture.
Speaking of the ways, I've noted 7 that were most common in the articles that I was going through. And if we can, I would try to get your opinion on each of them and have a brief discussion. Because the first one, I think we had an entire episode back in the first season about mission statements and values and the way they work. And I have quite different experiences here. Like, on one hand, I see that for many people, purposeful and meaningful work oriented to values, when values are shaped and formed, is really helpful. On the other hand, I personally experience the situations when people kind of say it's a formality for them, especially when the company is growing, and then you can't really explain or transfer everything. And it's getting painful for people who believe when other people don't, and it becomes more of a trouble than actually a helpful tool, because like there are advocates who say like, yeah, like we believe in ABC, and then someone says, ABC is just an alphabet. It cannot be naturally shaped like that because it's A, B, and C.
Right. I think to me, the first and foremost expression of corporate culture is behaviors, and like by and large, I'm not sure if the definition alluded to that. Climate define the way employees and management interact. So like they touch on behaviors, and I think this is how you quote unquote measure. So if you come in here and you are tasked with understanding what's the corporate culture or what's the culture of this place, I guess I'm not sure what it would be interesting to hear what you would do in this situation. But I would like come in, and the first thing I would be doing, observing behavior of people and like how they interact, and that with that I would start building the map of this corporate culture. So those behaviors for me are the primary thing, and missions, statements, and core values and stuff like that, they can be meaningful if they reflect the behaviors, and vice versa. If the behaviors are intentionally shaped such that they reflect those values. But if there is a disparity there, it's just like, all right, it's just a poster on the wall. And the corporate culture becomes disregarding of those the very idea of mission statements and corporate culture altogether.
I would even add to this, because sometimes it can be described as something real, and then within 2 or 3 years things change and it becomes a poster on the wall. Something that used to describe things stops describing things.
Right. And that's the worst. That I think this kind of inspires cynicism and disconnectedness in people, and this is a step towards I don't know what, like doom or something.
And that's a dilemma I'm facing right now, because I have a feeling that our corporate culture needs to be refreshed, but people are not really into this sort of activity right now. And I see that the longer it stays like this, the more resistance we're going to get, because it is incorporated in the feedback, in some QA forms and stuff. So people do face these things, and when they stop believing in them, it kind of gets risky. And right now I understand that the team can be burning out and getting exhausted because of the outside events, not just because of the way they work, but because of the way they live. And it's a challenge whether we should spend valuable resource, attention, and stuff for such impractical thing that probably does not impact things directly. And if we should, what's the best way to explain to the team that, guys, we should actually spend a day discussing these high matters and complicated terms?
I don't know.
I don't expect an answer. It was just
change is difficult, like enormously difficult, and here, regardless, despite me saying that I do believe that corporate culture can be managed, I think this is enormously hard task, and it's inherently unpredictable, right? You can try do something and then hope for the result, and the best thing you can do then is that then monitor, and if things are not moving in the direction you wanted, try something else, like have another idea or hypothesis how to shift the ship in the different direction, and try something else. I think for me, and here I'm very cognizant of the fact that for different people their mileage might vary. What for me, what helps to bring meaning to such activities like working on the mission and stuff like that is to somehow, again, it's not easy to show connection between exercises like this and at least some positive outcomes in the future. So let's say like we force bag people to come to this like strategy shaping exercise, something like that, or mission refinement thing, and then we do that, maybe reluctantly, but then if one can spot that, hey, in this situation the mission helped us make the decision like faster, or the decision that turned out to be better, and because those can be smaller scale things, they can happen sooner, and we can see the results on shorter time scales. It might be possible, and bringing this connection now and again and again and again can create a climate where those mission discussion things can happen more often and with less resentment from participants or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a question, and I think it deserves an entire episode, but I think we should move on.
Yep.
And the next thing, which for me is probably the only tool I know that can get people to manage something, is employee service and feedback. And for me, these are the two things about managing. You measure, and then you do something about it.
Right.
And given the clear criteria and how do you understand that the person fits or doesn't fit, contributes or doesn't contribute to the culture you're building? That's a big question. And getting people's opinion on what the way they understand it, the way they feel it, is also highly important. So maybe one-on-one meetings as well. But I think it's also the question of the format, because feedback could be a meeting, could be a survey, could be something else, could be a message.
Right. Yep. Well, I would think that's very, very important. Like in order to manage something, especially something unpredictable, you need to form feedback loops, and this would be one of ways to do that. And I would think that a useful form of feedback could be those like one-on-ones that managers have with their teams, and managers, like higher level managers, have with the managers who they support, and so on and so forth. And through those feedback loops, also assess the culture and maybe try to shape it. And I will never stop saying that, like, you need to be careful with surveys, because what people say and what people do are two different things. And depending on how the survey is structured, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And like when people say that, no, yes, we want this, or we will do this in this situation, definitely, you probably double check that, because we have a tendency to think of ourselves like better than we are. And maybe we cannot always completely put ourselves into shoes of a different person, or ourselves in different situation, and what we say might be very different from what we actually do.
I think that in surveys, I mostly value the open-ended questions rather than the facts and numbers, because people do say yes and no. They put something on scale from 1 to 10. But if you give the same survey the next day, and then the day before that, and the day after that, these are 3 very different results. So I believe that the quotes can say much more. Like if the person is getting cynical or frustrated about something, you'll see it in the open-ended questions, especially if it's something kind of philosophical, not as practical, because people can tell, yes, my chair is comfortable, yes, the screen is wide enough, and the keyboard is pretty white. But when you ask about some different matters, like do you feel comfortable with the team? And how would you describe your latest team interactions? This is where you can catch the signals. And I feel as if I'm becoming one of these system design interviewers, who catch the signals and try to detect something. This is magic. It's not measurable. It's intuition and interpretations. And this is where I get frustrated, because we are running a employee satisfaction survey right now in our team. Mm-hmm. And when I see the results, I like that I get some input. Mm-hmm. I can't rely on this input very much. I understand the importance of getting this input, but also then there is the importance of acting upon this. Like when you have some data, just use it. And sometimes it's very controversial.
Right. And I think the two additional thoughts on this. I think it is with measuring something like this. I think this is a useful thing. It's not without challenges, but it's useful. And what can also be helpful is seeing the dynamics of the situation. So having those satisfaction surveys regularly, so that you do not you get additional signal in the difference between current results and previous results and results before that, in addition to kind of absolute values of that. And there was one other thing. Right. I think when I was in the university, right, I studied applied mathematics, and I believed then, and still kind of believed in like mathematics and like the right way to do things, and social sciences and like surveying and analyzing survey data for like social type of things were always, well, at least at that time, were a bit of a black magic for me. I was like, yeah, it's so imprecise, like how you can interpret this stuff. Now, later on, when I learned more advanced statistics and stuff like that, I thought, like, yes, there are ways to get meaningful data out of that. I think I wanted to draw a connection between what you mentioned, that looking at specific wordings of individual people can give subtle, useful signals about that. But I guess that only works as so much, right? When you have thousands of employees, you cannot read wording for each and every one of them, and their like clever, sophisticated ways of crafting those surveys with more of numerical values can be helpful just to get signals from the bigger population.
Even on teams of my size, it's getting challenging. let's take an example. Let's say we would like to improve the response time in our messenger and ask people to react within a day. A day, not hours, but at least within a day. And then I realized that 6 different managers go to their teams, and when and how they're going to deliver this feedback can be very different. And after talking to all the managers and asking them to make actions on response time, then there is like an entire set of after party actions that you have to go through, like reminders, questions, how did people react, checking, measuring stuff, and it turns into a project. While in theory, you should say like, guys, we should care about this more. It's important. Could you please give feedback to your teams? And they give feedback to their teams. Tick, done, next.
Right, but then that kind of is the epitome of the idea of value, right? If you care about something, it means that you are ready to forego some other things which may be important or valuable just for you to achieve this one particular thing. So if we value the response time, I guess we have to go extra length to ensure that people can do that. And I don't know, here for some of things like that, it might be helpful, or at least automation sometimes may help, right? If in Slack there are bots, I think, and there may be bots that would remind people about something and like analyze if there was no response or something like that. And
they can, but them. I mean, you don't get the statistics behind them, unfortunately. You do get, it works personally as reminders, but people you don't know what's the overall situation in your team unless you come and actually measure like 24 hours after some announcements and events whether there was a reaction.
That's true.
Tricky. Let's move to the recognition and rewards, because let's just say I'm really bad at this thing. I'm not really good at celebrations and recognizing some victories in general. I don't do it for myself personally, and I find it hard and insincere when somebody does that. Like, he's the employee of the month, or that's the greatest bug fix we've ever done, or it seems weird. And I know that many people do care about recognitions and rewards and being recognized publicly, being recognized privately, getting some compliments, not even always it comes to money, but any sort of gifts for the achievements they've made. And it's really hard for me to build it in as a habit as a manager to, especially to shape such events and processes when I personally don't care about recognition and rewards for myself. Honestly recognizing and rewarding others becoming a real challenge.
That's interesting. I think it may be worth here to distinguish or to kind of separate rewards from recognition. Rewards, it indeed sounds like something on a bigger scale or something like that, where you had a very successful year or something, you achieved something, you get a reward for that. But then recognition to me is something that can and should happen on a much smaller scale, and like if when someone did something kind of right, maybe, and I don't know, like intern for the first time ever, submitted like PR where you don't have any major concerns, or like or they fixed the mistakes that they used to make, and like for the first time ever they submit stuff without those deficiencies. Like it would be great to recognize that, and hey, you did a great job on this one. And to me, this would fall into this category of recognition, and I think this can help. Like it's quick feedback loop that can help shape the culture when you recognize quote unquote useful behavior, and kind of
for me it's easy when I see some impactful activities, like somebody gets away from the usual behavior and does something non-standard. For instance, when the invasion started, many people supported save initiatives and some volunteering events, and it was quite easy to recognize because, like, I honestly believe that this is something special. But 95% of the time and 95% of the tasks are routine and usual, and recognizing that the person is doing, let's say, accounting. Like, good accounting should happen. That's the thing. And I realized that supportive feedback is important, but like, yes, guys, you have been doing this great job for a few years, and you probably will keep doing that. I appreciate it, but I just kind of need an occasion for that. I don't know, let's say quarterly retrospective or some sort of bigger thing in my mind to remember about it. Because when I just see contracts and accounting reports flowing and nothing bad happens, it seems like a norm, not like an achievement or something that has to be recognized. But probably it should be.
I think it should be like even if the regular work happens as expected. Isn't this a great thing when bus you take to your work?
The thing is, I don't feel this excitement. You know, I don't get this like, yay, like we've been doing this amazingly for 2 years now.
But does it have to have this element of excitement? It has an element of like stability and reliability and trust, right?
Yeah, but then the recognition gets dry. I don't know, if you don't feel emotionally engaged into this activity, your recognition is formal. Like, well done, Dima, 250 something episodes.
That's interesting. I kind of want to argue with you on this, but I have a bit of a harder time coming up with arguments. But maybe let me start with a story or observation about English culture over here. We are both my wife and I. We are parts of our local group on Facebook for local community, and it is not uncommon. And in fact, I would say that this is quite a frequent thing where people, knowing that like there are quite a lot of people from the community, including like business owners and stuff, are in that group, they would share unprompted feedback about service they'd received in a restaurant or cafe or a show. That say like, hey, I came there, it was great, I got what I needed, like thumbs up, do more of this. So this is, from a certain point of view, this is not exciting. You just come to shop, you get your coffee, and you like go on your merry way from there. But if you look at this, that hey, it could have been much worse or something like that, it then becomes exciting, especially if you know that in some other places that particular thing could have gone terribly wrong, and it's worth recognizing that in this place you got what you wanted quickly without hassle, and like pat those people on the back for doing this, for doing their regular service.
And like, let's take an example of a podcast, soft skills engineering. The guys are doing amazing job. I think like they're fun, right. They're useful, they're helpful, and the format is nice. I've been listening to them for a few years, and right. At a certain point, it becomes routine, just like another episode of soft skills engineering. I know it's going to be good quality, but I don't feel like texting or commenting it as much as in the very first days when it was something new. The only time when I actually recognize that is when I have to refer them to someone, like somebody asks, what are the good shows? And then I can remember, like, yeah, these guys are good, and Cortex is good, and Biweekly is okay. And when there are some events, like they go to 300th episode, or there is a Q&A, or there is right. something special and outstanding, not just another weekly episode that gets published.
I hear you. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm not sure if this is something that stems from kind of our culture and our background and our upbringing, because I would consider us coming from roughly the same set of culture. And it seems that for other people or for people in other cultures, things like that come a lot more naturally, so that we expect things to be on the next level for us to recognize them, and then to share this with people. For others, it might be easier. And I think a solution to that might be in what you described, that you and I need events to happen for us to pay attention to this and to recognize something. And there may be a solution to that, because starting with this year, I wanted to do more of that for my team, like to find nuggets and pieces of, I don't want to say like good behavior because it sounds judgmental, but like those smaller things where people did something right, even though it may be something that directly expected of them. But hey, you may not know if they know that this is really expected of them. And I wanted to make it a point for myself, like every week or something like that, to kind of think about those moments and share those pieces of feedback with people who I work with. So in a sense, that was creating that event for me to think about this stuff. Initially, it was working well, but then I got kind of very busy with some other stuff and forgot about this thing. And now, looking back, I think that I didn't recognize good things as much as I did maybe in the first week of the year. And I would want to do more of that. So thanks for reminding me about this.
It reminded me an episode of Focused podcast when they were speaking about journaling, and one of the biggest sections is the gratitude writing, when you shape what things you are grateful for.
I don't know. We may want to discuss this a bit, but I really struggle with this. I have this section in my weekly kind of review. I'm so unhappy with what I put there. And I don't know how to improve this. Maybe we can talk about this sometime.
We definitely should. To get a few more points covered, I think the other thing that is worth mentioning is training, development programs, and mentorship system. We could put them all together. And to my mind, these things matter not just by the way what you learn, but the way how you learn.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, some of customer-facing managers in Slava are now going through Ukrainian classes. And I believe that it's a useful event for people from different teams to see each other in different contexts, to hear what others people have to say in some neutral environment, but also to see the attitude to achievements, getting results, moving towards the goals and some other areas. And you can't really formalize that. It just happens. So when there are book clubs, as you mentioned in your team, and Ukrainian classes in mine, and some other activities, but probably not the formal training that is required to do a specific job. Like if we release, let's say, new software and everybody has to learn this software, this is probably not as effective. It's still okay. It's necessary. It has to be done. But I believe that informal education is where the juice of corporate culture is shown. But once again, it's really hard to predict. And it brings me back to the question whether it's a manageable process or it's just the way to observe the situation.
I think I wanted to bring this kind of idea or example all the way along, and it may sound snobbish or something, but the way I look at this. So if we step back from corporate cultures like all together and look at field of, let's say, aero and hydrodynamics, just for a second, for a change of scenery, we kind of know. And granted, I'm not like super fluent in this area of physics and then related mathematics, so I might oversimplify or glance over things here. But to my understanding, we do know that like behaviors of fluids and and gases are described by what we call Navier-Stokes equations. There are three of them. You can look at them and they kind of make sense when you explain how they are constructed for uncompressible and unbreakable gases and liquids and stuff like
Dima?
that. But I'm getting to the point. But the key idea is that we do not have solutions to those equations. Like it is, we just don't know. But we use those equations to fly our aircraft, to pump liquids and stuff, water through the pipes and stuff like that. Because we found ways to solve, like to observe how things operate, and knowing that they obey certain laws, we can experiment and find ways which can give us predictable results in certain situations. It doesn't mean that we can predict and understand everything in random situation, but we understand enough about certain aspects to be able to predict within certain boundaries what's going to happen. And this is how I feel about corporate culture as well. So that you can take actions, these actions will influence corporate culture. You may not know exactly, there is no exact formula to predict how it is going to influence the culture, but maybe in certain conditions, with certain experience and knowledge, you may know that, hey, doing this is likely to produce a particular result which we may desire. So let's try doing that, see what happens, and then kind of iterate from that. This is my philosophical take or metaphysical take on corporate cultures,
Or just physical take,
or physical takes, and this is why I thought that I tried to make this correction, bring in the correction of emerging. Like we do small things and then something bigger emerges from them, but because it emerges, it's not constructed. We do not have the benefit of being able to predict what's going to happen. It's just going to happen, and we can observe and maybe react to that somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And it makes less sense when it comes to the next point about performance metrics. I think this is one of the most, what do you say, delusive or elusive?
Mm-hmm. Delusional?
Illusional. Like some things that seem measurable, and people try to get into the KPIs or KRs or any other priorities, things where they think, all right, we have this objective or this goal or this value or this something. How do we measure it? That's how we measure it. Let's put it into the KPIs of all people. Like if we care about timely reactions, like let's make it a KPI and track everything and try to get. And I'm one of these people. Like I like this stuff. I think that if you can measure things, you can understand them better. On the other hand, it kind of creates an illusion that everything is fine because you see the numbers and you don't really see the qualitative measurement or feature, whether it's really so. Let's say the amount of people who fill in the documentation and dashboard in time. Like, yep, like there is a standard, people work up to standard. Sometimes we even eventually check what they fill in, but still does it actually still refer to the initial value that we were going to, because filling these docs was to make people more focused on the result. They had to formulate the goals for every lesson. And that was built in order to make them more result-oriented, not process-oriented. That's, by the way, a huge problem in teaching experience, in my teaching experience as well, that people in our industry, they like the process. They can teach you for years because they love the language and they don't want to achieve your goals because then you will leave and something will have to change. And we built like an entire system to work with this trait. But at a certain point, these metrics, they kind of substitute the initial purpose. And that's when it becomes an illusion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The struggle is absolutely real. And if if we couple that with the idea that instituting a metrics influences the behavior of people and the system. So you have current situation, you institute metrics to drive the behavior in particular direction, but what you get as a result is like an indeterminate function of current state plus those metrics. They blend together to produce some sort of new behavior, not necessarily the behavior you expected when instituting those metrics. And I guess this may be a situation of a race of arms of sorts, where you have current situation, you find deficiencies, or like you want to change something about this, you come up with the best idea you have, like let's measure this to hopefully steer in this direction, but then things stir up for a moment, but then they settle down and start going in a different direction. And this is where you say, all right, we've now got this, what would be our best idea to start moving in different direction from here, and then you institute more metrics and maybe deprecate the old ones, and it's just like a never ending game of sorts.
And at a certain point, two managers could be working on the same issue, but figure out two different types of metrics that they will both implement, and they will contradict each other.
Yes. Why not? Well, I genuinely think that something like this is kind of underrated idea in whole of like management, system design, and so on and so forth. Like, isn't this great when you can afford it to have two teams try to work a solution to a problem, and they very well approach this from different angles with different perspectives and priorities and values and so on and so forth, and you have two different solutions to the same problem, and then you can choose which one is better, right?
That was the minute of diversity advocating by Dima, and my point was that when you have two managers impacting the same team from two different sides, let's say the middle manager and the top manager who create different strategies.
Yeah, then that doesn't sound
as exciting.
I guess. As exciting. It would be nice euphemism for this. Yeah, probably it would be nice for leadership to be kind of sort of aligned on how they think things should be developed.
And the variability and diversity are a big challenge here, because the way people see stuff and the way they interpret stuff is very different.
Right. But I think generally it might be not a great of idea for a skip manager to exert direct influence on the team.
But they build policies, and then when they build a policy or they introduce something that works on the higher level, and then on the implementation level, it kind of gets shakier, and people might also have their internal KPIs and measurements within the team, and they kind of contradict, because like, let's say the product team cares about the quality and the business team cares about the needs of the client, and sometimes these two things are not aligned, because the quality of the product might require different actions than satisfying the needs of the clients. And a usual developer is in trouble, because one has to pick between, like, the choice is whether we care about the team value, about the product quality, or business value, about the needs of the clients. In a specific case, when there is no solution that can satisfy both.
Well, I think two things about this. First would be that one-on-ones and like regular interactions to the rescue, like for the managers, like skip level manager and team manager to work out first spot and work out the differences in views and so on and so forth. But also I think for the developer, if he is kind of smart, this challenge can be turned into an opportunity, because they can step up and say that, hey, folks, we have these two conflicting priorities or views on the thing that we are going to build. Let me offer you several ways of how we can look at this and what can be the different trade-offs, so that you can choose which way we are going to go, and I think they can earn a lot of professional credit for them approaching it this way. It's like turning challenge into an opportunity.
That's a fair point.
But this struggle is real as always.
And probably the last thing that I wanted to mention today is the social events. And this thing is actually driving me crazy because I do use social events actively as a manager. Like I like meeting with my team, like with Artem Usik. We used to meet in Dnipro, go for walks, and then do a lot of out-of-work activities. Even tonight, we are having a party with some people who are in Ukraine. It's going to be a dinner with conversation and stuff. And at the same time, I resent informal parties and activities when they are arranged somehow. I don't know. I can't even define the difference. But when people say, like, let's meet in the office and play some board games, like, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm going to get to know you better in this process, or whether it's going to be interesting at the first place. And I see how amazingly effective informal communication is.
Mm-hmm.
We can give an example of these cooler conversations and like get in personal relationship to support the professional collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, when I see such initiatives that seem artificial, and when I try to initiate something like a book club somewhere, and I see that people are not really eager to join, I understand them because I'm not eager either to join some of the activities like this. And it's really hard to draw the line, like where it still makes sense and it's useful, and where it's just a standard managerial practice that has to be done because people has to meet informally and please 5 p.m. in the bar.
Informal meeting at 5 p.m. Agenda is in attached document. Yeah.
On the napkins. We will print it out for you. You don't have to bring you're not allowed to bring your laptops in.
All right. Yeah, I'm 100% with you on this. Like, I don't think I would not count like social events as like an instrument, at least not to 100%, maybe to 5% an instrument for building corporate cultures. And the way I'm looking at this is that social events can be an indicator and useful indicator of what kind of culture we are dealing with. But they have to, like those social events, I think they have to emerge. It is almost impossible to institute them from above, because it would be like it's going to be a mess. Like everyone is going to resent going there. But I'm also with you that on the fact that those informal communication is great and very useful. And I think now, if someone asks me, like, how do we organize those social events to kind of bring a bit more of informal communication into this thing, my recommendation would be to do that in a way where you say, let's say book club, right? You want to try a book club, you find one other person who would also be interested in doing this, and then you say that, hey, on such and such, John and I are going to do a book club where we read this book and we are going to discuss this. Hey, if you're interested, come join us. And that's it. Not saying, like, let this thing emerge if it can. If it has no legs, no one comes, and even John gets kind of demotivated by doing the next episode. Like, all right, yeah, that's fine. We tried, it didn't work. Let's maybe try something else. So, like, say we are going to like theater this time. Want to join us? Please come over, and maybe this way, the team or whoever they can find a way, an activity or something like that to coalesce themselves around, and it can be started that way. But saying, come 5 p.m. meeting room on the 3rd floor without laptops, yeah, that's a great social
weed, please.
Yeah, that's a great social event right there. Quote unquote.
So, what was the most useful thing for me in this conversation, apart from the physics and learning about the equations? I think it will get into some top value things that I learned from Biweekly. Was the idea about refinement of the mission statement and values and the way people feel them. I think that was some good food for thoughts. And the idea about recognition and rewards. I definitely have to do more thinking about the way I, as a manager, run this stuff and the way it is arranged in our company. So thank you for highlighting those things for me.
And thank you for highlighting especially the recognition bit for me, because it slipped through my attention that I think I stopped doing that, and now looking back I feel like that would be great for me to continue doing more of that. And as always, thanks to you for bringing the structure to such a complex topic. I think we managed to go through a lot of stuff today because you brought this structure. People say that corporate culture is this and this. Let's really measure if this is a part of corporate culture. And I think it was great all around discussion for the topic. Thanks for that.
I'm still not sure whether it's manageable, but we should definitely give it a try.
Yeah, I want to believe.
And I would like to believe that you're going to have a good week.
Yep. You too. Have a good week.